Hello and everyone. I'm Manasi Phadnis from YourStory Media. This session is powered by Rural Marketing Association of India in association with YourStory Media. From consumer behavior and buying patterns to how advertising efforts steered into the direction of low tiers and rural areas, Decade of Change will be a series of virtual webinars focused around discussions on the changes which have taken place in the past decade in rural India. The series will bring together experts and leaders across industries where they will exchange knowledge, learnings, and practices from various verticals like fintech, media, distribution, agriculture, and more. Now, startups are at the forefront of the ongoing digital revolution in India, which has the power to transform lives and drive new narratives of growth, especially in rural India. They are breaking barriers and venturing into unexplored business terrains. Better internet connectivity and online infrastructure has also contributed towards bridging the gap between rural and urban India, leading to a positive impact on societies, economies, and lifestyles. The upcoming session in the series will focus on how, over the past decade, startups have redefined rural India and have been empowering and facilitating the implementation of business opportunities for better life quality across the rural parts. To discuss this further with us, we have an amazing panel of speakers. We have with us Vamsi Udayagiri, founder and CEO Hesa. With his years of experience in supply chain and aftermarket supply chain management, Vamsi has been working towards building and creating sustainable rural businesses, which has accelerated the expansion of Hesa's rural outreach. Next, we have Mr. Rajat Vardhan, co-founder and CEO AgroNxt, an agri graduate and ABM from Vamnicom, and Rajat possesses more than 14 years of experience in agri-tech startup, financial services, seed sales, commodities, and agri-warehousing. Since July 2016, he is leading AgroNxt, an IoT-enabled digital agriculture platform, as a co-founder and CEO, which have equity ownership by IIT Kanpur and grant and aid support by DST, Government of India, and Ministry of Agriculture. And last but not the least, we have Mr. Benjamin Mathew, President, Rural Transformation Center, Deshpande Foundation. A seasoned rural marketing professional with an experience spanning 25 years, Benjamin has been instrumental in building some robust business models in both corporate as well as the development sector. Currently, he is spearheading the Rural Transformation Program at Deshpande Foundation. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you all with us here today. And now, without taking much time, let's dive into this conversation. And I would like to start off by asking all of you one question. What are the key aspects on which rural businesses are built? What do they thrive on? Vamsi, let's begin with you.
Yeah, thanks for this opportunity. I feel that rural businesses are always built on relationship and trust. A very strong fundamental grassroots connection is what drives them together. And the way we are seeing a lot of these social commerce models today, but actually rural is always socially driven because relationship and trust are the key driving factors. And I personally feel that that's driving or thriving the way rural businesses are done.
Absolutely, very well put, Vamsi. Benjamin?
I think I completely go with Vamsi and I concur his points. I think, over the time, I think the Indian rural has really changed. And also the fact is that it has now become an economic model. I mean, businesses, aspirations, things have kind of changed and it has changed for the better. So, in terms of doing that, some of the models that we really look at, it is fundamentally based upon trust and one we call in terms of marketing consistency. Be there. That's the key important element. You don't go in and go get out, but you be there, be with them in their social milieu and work out. And that's where the businesses and the relationships are built and things go along afar. So that's what kind of things how rural looks like now.
Right, thank you, Benjamin. Rajat?
I think carry on with what Mr. Vamsi and Mr. Benjamin has said. I firmly believe that trust is one of the most important factors. Along with the trust, I see that commitment to deliver what has been produced is one of the key factors to ensure that what has been produced is actually reaching to where
Right. So yes, so trust, I think being there and commitment, like Rajat said, I think are the three key aspects on which businesses are built and they thrive on, especially in rural India. Now, Vamsi, I would like to ask you this. Now, through HESA's rural outreach program, you are assisting rural population from a consumer standpoint and are also making rural outreach possible for brands with your integrated B2B rural marketplace. Tell us about the genesis of this. What was the idea behind it?
Yeah, so our entire model, Hesa model, is built from the consumer's perspective. We started thinking, what all a consumer in rural would need, and how often they need it, and how frequently actually, they have to step out of their village to get all these things. If you look at, in any consumer's life, a day in their life, like, they have to literally step out of their village where they have to, let's say, do a banking transaction, to a financial transaction, or and buying certain FMCG products, or if they are a farmer, they need to, sell their agri produce. So the way the dependency to step out of their village, it's very high. And at an average, based on our survey, we have realized that 8 to 9 times is what a consumer in a village travels out of their village every month. That's a huge, not only a financial burden, but also they have to leave their existing work and, go out of their village. So this is when, we came up with this idea that why can't we create a sector agnostic marketplace? So with this premise, what we have done is anything and everything a consumer need in a village has been aggregated into a one super app, what we call as Hesa. And this super app is being offered to an influencer or an entrepreneur. As I said, relationship and trust are the key driving factors. So these influencers
Right.
are being created across multiple rural geographies, and they have been offered this Hesa platform so that they can offer the same consumer who has 10 different needs, so that he or she, doesn't need to go out of their village. At the same time, you have the brand on the other side who wants to reach out to those target consumers. So it's a completely phygital marketplace model where on one end you have a brand, on one end you have a consumer, and this influencer in between tries to connect consumer with various needs. So today we have mapped like as varied as a 14, 15 different services, be it a banking, insurance, agri, FMCG, loans, savings, products like that. But the thought process with which this entire thing is built is why can't we, offer a sector agnostic marketplace? Because in an urban scenario, you have many apps through which, as a consumer, I can get everything at a jiffy. But as a rural consumer, you have to literally, depend to go out of the village. So that's the model with which we have built in, and thanks to the way, the communities have picked up, I think, we have got a good traction, and we are just scaling this.
Right. But Vamsi, what were the challenges like when you first began and how did you tackle those?
Yeah. So, I mean, by the way, it's not an easy ride. I conceptualized this in 2012. It almost took 8 years for me to crack before even, I entered this. Primarily, the reason being, the almost zero penetration of internet, mobile, acceptance of technology in the rural. So, immediately after starting in 2012, 13, we got some failures based on which we thought that okay, I mean, let's gain experience, let's do things that matters most at that time, and meanwhile we gain the experiences, but always kept this thought process of Hesa model at the back. So yeah, we kind of took a lot of these physical models in terms of helping brands to connect to rural, or helping rural folks to buy certain products. But after this, that was the major challenge where, like, so many times, we were actually forced to a situations where, probably we may not launch this kind of a platform because the way rural is constructing and all. But, we stick to our nerves. We gained experience because 8 years being in a rural domain with whatever we wanted to do, but, couldn't get a chance to do it is very tough thing. But I think always we started working from the angle of what a consumer wants, and we were always connected with them. We were always, connected with the brands on one side and the communities on the other side. So which enabled us to, be on top of the situation. So the moment we, created this pilots after 2019, we realized that this is the time after, you have a lot of geo penetration into rural, WhatsApp penetrated, TikTok, YouTube penetrated. So we thought it's time to bring our idea, and we got an immediate traction. People started loving our model because at the end of the day, we are not only solving the problem of a business, but we are also solving the problem of a consumer, which is important because he or she doesn't need to step out of their village. Hardly 50 meters away, you find an influencer who is literally, acting as a genie to solve all the things. So yes, capacity building is a challenge. Getting a right partner is a challenge. But I think beyond all these things, I think the way we kind of constructed this platform and stick to our nerves, I think that was the major challenge which we faced.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing your journey, Vamsi, with us. Now, coming to rural startups, I would like to ask you this, Benjamin. In your experience, first with March Rural, transforming rural reach of brands, and now currently with Deshpande Foundation, transforming rural startups, how has the change been from then to now?
Oh, that's a very interesting question that you asked, and and I think the journey has been really wonderful. But it's a mindset change. When you really work with the corporate sector and the development sector, and how you really look at the market. When you come to startup, it's a different ecosystem by all. And when I say startup from rural, there are two elements that we really look at. One is basically startup that is working for rural, so that means it is solving the problem of rural, or coming from rural. That means the origin of the startup founder is actually from rural. So that becomes a completely different ball game altogether, and how you really look at. And that journey, you need to be very empathetic. There are a lot many things that they don't understand. How do you kind of take their trajectory, help them, guide them, give him the first investments, look at the technical know-hows, all those things. Has been a kind of a really better journey. But I think from a market perspective, that has a bigger scope. As I keep on telling these numbers, that out of the 648 districts, 593 districts have at least one startup coming in. So that's a really big change that has happened in the last 5 years or so, and that's wonderful change that is happening.
Right. Thank you, Benjamin, for that. Now, Rajat, talking about startups focus on addressing rural or agricultural needs, your IoT-enabled digital agriculture platform is assisting rural population on ground, enabling them to make things easier for them, right? Now, considering the gap in slow technology adoption, how did you tackle this? How has tech adoption changed amongst farmers since you started off in 2016?
So, Mansi, thank you for the question. So, I would like to take you back to 2016. So, when we were starting AgroNxt, what we did is we prepared a questionnaire, and as a team, we went to Punjab, we went to Himachal Pradesh, we went to Haryana and part of Western Uttar Pradesh. We went to state agriculture universities, we went to research stations and Krashi Vigyan Kendras. We went to mandis. We surveyed farmers and we tried to understand the acceptance of any digital platform at their end. So we realized that the highest acceptance back then we found was there in Punjab, and that is how we started our operation from Chandigarh. And from there till today, I realized that there is a sea change. You will find, just like Vamsi was just speaking out, you will find people consuming data. Back then, I believe the internet penetration was hardly 10 to 12% in rural markets, which is closely 30% of the population till date. You will find people consuming a lot of data at YouTube. So we found out that now this is the opportunity, this is the emerging area wherein digital agriculture platform will find a lot of acceptance because data cost is really, really low. The road infrastructure is really improving. So there are a lot of possibilities that when you create a complete digital infrastructure and when you plug in IoTs to the entire solution, so with affordability in mind, people will be accepting digital solution in terms of products as well as services, and that is how AgroNxt has witnessed the growth.
Right, absolutely. I think you are absolutely right. I think internet accessibility made it possible for a lot of startup penetration in rural India. Now, on that note, I would like to ask you this. What, according to you, is the potential for rural focused startups like yours today?
I see, Vansi, that the potential is actually tremendous. From the side of investment perspective, from the hope perspective for entrepreneurs like you, way back in 2015, the investment by private equity funds was hardly 20 million, which is grown up to 242 million USD in 2020. So that in itself is a huge signal that the belief on the side of investors on rural startups is actually growing, especially on the side of edtech based startups. And secondly, I believe that road infrastructure is improving, data is improving, fintech solutions are emerging. You will find out a gamut of areas wherein startups, especially agtech startups, can play its role. You have got agriculture inputs to be focused. You have got biotech to be focused. You have got SaaS platform getting acceptability. You have got IoTs. You have got fintech solutions getting a lot of acceptability. Beam and UPI has played a huge role. You will find even smaller shops in nook and corners of the country accepting payments by UPI, right? So we believe that all of this together will actually bring a lot of scope as far as infrastructure, building rural infrastructure is concerned, building rural market linkages is concerned, fintech is concerned, and likewise it will go on and go forward.
Right. Now, Benjamin Rajat mentioned the growth in investments as well in startups in rural India, right? So, as an investor, how do you view the evolution of the Indian startup ecosystem, especially given the Digital India campaign and Startup India program?
I think, Mansi, the fact is that these have been the backbone of the Indian startup ecosystem. There is no questions about it. Right from the point of view of the entire technical know-how that as a mentorship and guidance that comes to startups, along with the seed funding, the first risk capital that the government of India kind of puts in is coming from their side. So that's what's changed the entire mind game. If you really look at the 4 5 years back, not many people wanted to kind of invest in, as mentioned, that private equity was almost very little. Nobody wanted to kind of get in. But at least uh, looking at this scenario, you have got that traction in terms of really the first risk takers are there. Now more private sector equity coming in. Even independent houses are also coming in. Angel investors who have some money wanted to kind of get in is also coming in. So there are smaller ticket sizes that are going to kind of really pave the way for the entire investment to kind of really roll over. And over and above this, I think the new phase of the game in terms of finances, revenue-based financing that is kind of coming in, and I'm kind of jumping the gun at that. These are also part of the entire financing that the startups is kind of starting to get in. So it's an exciting
Right.
time. I guess the resources are there. Slightly harder to come by, but yes, the resources are there, and there is traction for it to come.
Right, absolutely right. Now, here I would like to bring you in here, Vamsi. Now, with the implementation of the Digital India campaign and the Startup India program, how have you seen the evolution of startups in India from the point of view of a rural commerce setup?
Yeah. See, I strongly believe that the digital pathway has really opened up and provided ample space for everybody to ride it. I mean, be it the startups, be it the communities, but more importantly, the fellow citizens, who are staying in rural India. And the kind of model, we at Hesa ours is an aggregated model. So we are a marketplace where we like to work with, likes of, let's say, AgroNxt here, who is offering IoT solutions, or with the banks, or with some UPA players or insurance players. So see, because with a lot of these, digital, campaigns that have happened, there are a lot of solutions that have brought in, and with the help of Start India program, I mean, like last 1.5 2 years, I think the way Startup India program has really helped us to scale, as if the way they aggressively they have really helped the startups to actually come to this bandwagon of riding upon this network. I think this was an amazing work by the entire stakeholders who are involved, and thanks to the the foundations like Deshpande Foundation, who have been doing this for years. Because I remember I attended one of the workshops way back in 2011-12, where they were actually, before even this entire concept of supporting startups, they were actually doing it. But now, coming from the rural commerce point of view, I personally believe that from a viability point of view, if you are offering an individual solution, and for you to go and reach to those large rural masses, like you have 4 lakh villages in India which have less than 10,000 population. You cannot go and operate by yourself, to get into a village of 1,000, 2,000, because it doesn't make any commercial sense. So that's where, from a
Right.
rural commerce point of view, I think that's where we kind of, it's not that I'm trying to showcase Hesa. There are a lot of models who are doing it, but at a last mile, it has to be an amalgamation of all these experiences and all these services from a consumer's point of view, so that it makes commercially viable. Otherwise, you may be developing a very beautiful solution which may change the entire thing, but at the end of the day, it has to make a commercial sense to it. And from the again from the rural marketplace point of view, we are equally committed and equally invested on nurturing these relationship with this other fellow startups, so that we collectively can go and offer a better solution to the consumer who is sitting there, which we have been doing in
Right.
the last 8+ years. We've created enough branded solutions along with players in the agriculture, players in the insurtech, players in the are creating the jobs to the rural folks, or whatever. So I think it's a best times, especially for people who are actually going and trying to target the rural hinterland, because now with a lot of aspirational goals also increased at the rural consumer end, I think this is one of the best times to be operating in this hinterland.
Right. So, would it be right to say that collaborations are also key when it comes to penetrating the rural markets?
I highly yes, because until unless you collaborate, see, okay, let me take an example, because the same consumer, let's say, who is a farmer, also need a loan, also need an agri input. At the same time, he may need to have an insurance. If three people go and try to attack the farmer individually versus collaboratively, they go and you offer a comprehensive solution that makes the win-win situation for both the farmer as well as the startups working there.
Right, absolutely. Yes, thank you for explaining that. Now, Rajat, I would like you also to weigh in on this. Do you think, as an agri-tech startup that's been working with farmers on ground, Digital India and Startup India program have helped bolster up the penetration in rural India?
Yes, Mansi, I would certainly agree to the point. There is a lot which government has done in last couple of years. I realized
Hmm.
that when we started way back in 2016, the Startup India concept was just evolving. So now this
Right.
has like gone to the next level. Number one, the availability of the seed fund is pretty much easy in comparison to like 2015-16. The average ticket size for a startup, if they have got a real solution, if they are really providing a solution, so there are seed funds, and there are angel investors, which Mr. Benjamin just spoke about. So that is also one availability. Then focused effort by the institutions under Government of India, like top-notch institutions like IITs, IIMs. Then Ministry of Agriculture has also come up and asked IARI and state agriculture universities to come up with their own incubators. So that has also helped in a huge way to ensure that talent based in tier 2 and tier 3 town, they also come up with their own ideas, and they also offer their solutions, which are really helping out our farming community. So I believe that this trend has been on the upper side of it. And what happens is, when government somewhere recognizes a startup or some angel investor gives certain sort of recognition, that becomes a turning point for a startup, wherein with the visibility, the VCs also starts looking at the startup from a bigger perspective. And that is where the opportunity for the startup grows manifold to offer a solution, and not to just offer an India-based solution, but a product and portfolio which can really cater to the global demand as well.
Right, absolutely. Raja, thank you for sharing that. Now, Amsi, coming to you as someone who has worked at both ends of the market spectrum with brands as well as consumers, do you think there is a change in how brands looked at rural consumers a decade ago versus now? And from a rural consumer perspective, do you think there is better acceptance of brands today?
Yes, I think on both ends there has been a sea change. If you closely look at from the brand perspective, see, the thing is, first, all the brands started on the urban or the town population, because you have many avenues through which you can reach out to them, and only after that they started focusing on the so-called next billion. And you won't believe the kind of brands that we work with, top brands. I mean, I don't want to name them. They are the leading FMCG players. So when it comes to getting the insights from a village which has, let's say, 3,000 population or a 5,000 population, so because they don't have that the complete data insights in terms of what is the consumer persistence. The way consumer is perceives about this entire brand, or the way what is the natural pull that is happening from the consumers who are living in these kind of villages. That's one thing which brands didn't have, or probably their nearest last mile, who may be their distributor or retailer, is happy distributing to a 1 lakh population town or a village, because the same, if he wants to go to reach to that 1 lakh population, he has to go to 100-150 villages where the cost of operations are very higher. But now I think with kind of models that there are a lot of these last mile connect models based on which a lot of these FMCG players or a lot of these brands are trying to reach to the end consumer through driving upon these models. From the consumer point of view, yes, I think last 5-6 years there has been a really a sea change in terms of the way consumer has started looking at brands, especially because of there is a high level of aspirational goals that have increased. Now people, their per capita incomes have increased. Their next generation started moving to towns or cities where they are exposed to better comforts or better brands, which naturally has now gotten back to the villages where there is a natural pull for these kind of brands. So yes, I see that this is going to be a good opportunity both from the brand's perspective and the consumer perspective. The only thing is like how economically you can actually make it connected between both these the challenge. But otherwise, I think on the both ends there has been a lot of change there.
Right. But I would also like to ask you this. The pandemic changed a lot of things, right? It also changed it also changed consumer behavior. It also changed the way brands looked at consumers. Do you think the pandemic played a big role in this change?
In a way, yes, because people actually got a first shock of their life, and then they slowly started realizing, and that's when they were exposed to many things that were available to us, which probably we were not even focusing on it on our, based on our day to day busy or lives and all. But I think that pandemic situation has created that kind of a friction, or that kind of I would say a positive enthusiasm also in the people to actually look at various things that are available, and people also started looking at better avenues. Let me take this example. Today, we work with all these influencers, and we have more than 600 of these influencers who have reverse migrated from urban to rural during pandemic. So, I mean, ideally, they would have gone back to urban, but now, if they are earning whatever they are earning in urban, or if not 80% of what they are earning, sitting in their own village, and I mean it's a very decent income opportunity for them. And as these people are already exposed to these kind of the brands and all, definitely. So I think yes, pandemic in many ways has actually changed the perception of the way consumer was thinking, or the brand was thinking, or the way a lot of enablement was happening. And thanks to a lot of these startups, thanks to a lot of these government support, which have actually enabled many things to actually reach to the last mile.
Right. Rajat, I would also like to bring you in here. If you could just talk about and shed some more light on how the pandemic changed things for Hesa as a rural consumer focused startup. Could you shed some light on that?
Yeah, Mansi, sure. So for us, we believe that this pandemic has given us altogether different perspective to look at the market we were serving. We realized during the pandemic time that the belief of farming communities and a channel which was present in the rural India that has gone up as far as the trust in the startup for delivering solution is concerned, because we were looking at them that they just do their commitment and they believe in us. So what happened in this pandemic period, that we also delivered back to them, and this has bridged up a deeper ties between the startup communities and customers which were there in rural areas. Number two, I believe that the focus of government towards ensuring that startups should actually thrive in the rural market, that has also gone up. So we got supported by government during the pandemic period, and I believe several other startups would have also been benefited the way AgroNxt got benefited. And what has happened during this transition period, that the data consumption started going up and up. And that
Right.
for us opened up the door to bring in IoT driven solutions to the
Hmm.
rural market. And I believe that has been a big point of transition for organizations like us to serve at a scale and to deliver a solution which is highly affordable as well as acceptable at the end of users. So the journey of the user starts by consuming data at platforms like YouTube, but actually what happens is they start hitting up applications and they start consuming what is being offered by applications and the platform, and that is where the tectonic change starts coming in. So my one line answer is huge benefit to us in this pandemic period as far as from the learning aspect. One more thing, Mansi, I would also like to add over here, the availability of talent in startups like offering the rural solutions has also gone up. So the top-notch talent, they believe that pandemic is one point of transition wherein we should really think of serving to the rural India, and that is where they have come forward, and they believe that if India is to be built, we should really come up and deliver solution and support the solution which are already available in the market. So I think a great time.
Right. Pandemic has certainly, I think, served as an equalizer of sorts.
Yeah.
So now,
Yeah.
as we see more and more startups focusing on and emerging out of rural India, Benjamin, how are investors looking at Bharat-based startups or startups aimed at solving for Bharat, whether it's an agri-tech startup like AgroNxt or rural consumer-focused startup like Hesa?
I think it's a very valid question. I think let me just talk from a point of view of an investor as well as a technology business incubator perspective. See, what I feel is that both has that direction to kind of take place. And second point is that if I really look at the economic part of it, sorry, just a minute. Economic point of it, agri-tech startups are going to be a $25 billion market in the next 5 years. Okay, so there are studies, there are directions already, and there are enough problems that we need to solve in rural India. I mean, there is no questions about it. Every solution has a startup angle. Every solution has a consumer who wants it and is aspirational for it. Therefore, the journey would be really great. And from an investment side, I think the government is already there. I mean, I can talk about the Nidhi, Prayas, Nidhi, Triple S. I mean, what not kind of investments are right now available, including the private sector. I think people are open to take that risk, and as they take that risk, I think this journey is going to be eventually a very fulfilling one. But I go back to the same point what Vamsi and Rajat said is that viability is the key. Otherwise, how do you really, if you don't work with the market, it's going to be difficult. You need to find solutions which makes it the last mile, reach the right audience, right consumers, have the brand, all those things, but with some economic benefit that accrues. So that's the biggest struggle when you really look at rural. Otherwise, the market is already there to kind of really move on. There's no questions about it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Benjamin, for sharing that and explaining that to us so well. Now, before we open the floor for our viewers for Q&A, I would like to ask you all, what are the key points to keep in mind in terms of investment when you are a rural focused or rural startup? Vamsi, let's begin with you.
Okay, so I mean, I can only share from my experiences. So, see, I think a very strong fundamental model which has a strong unit economics is always, irrespective of wherever we are operating. I think that's the way we normally, should build it. And I mean, thanks to the kind of model that we have built in, I think we are at a unit level, viable. The only place probably we are spending is for expansion or for whatever technology and other stuff. So that I know that's the first thing where you need to build a very strong unit economics model, and also like Benjamin and Rajat said, you need to work very closely with the markets. Uh, I mean, you can't agree more that there is enough and more business that is already available. The only thing is you need to work very closely with the market, understand what the communities need, offer a right solution, and and then followed with a very strong service model. So I think then you can make a very successful model. And then I would say, the other crucial aspect is looking at a scale, because I personally am a believer that any impact that you're trying to do, if it is not at scale, I mean, it may not be a viable solution. You cannot build a solution for a village or a town or a state. I mean, like, if you're building it, you have to build it for at least India. You need to look at the scale. So having said that, what I mean to say is, like, you need to focus on the local regional needs, but at the same time also look at the way how you can scale it and make it appealing to the larger audiences, which is entire India market. So I think these are the three things that I would consider.
Right. Thank you, Vamsi, for sharing your thoughts on this. Rajat, what are your thoughts on this? What do you think are the key areas that one should focus on in terms of investment, especially from a rural startup point of view?
So Mansi, how do I see this? First of all, for any rural startup, it is really important that you are not focusing on entire full stack solution at the first go. You have to have limited area to focus, prove your solution, build up trust in limited geographies. When that trust is leading to deeper ties, you start getting the demand from your customers in a regular way. And when that happens, you have to have the patience. While you scale up, you have to have the patience for a longer period of time. I believe that focusing on rural markets, you need to have at least 10 years of patience to take up the solution to complete sustainability and to have a full-fledged growth and a scalable offering at a larger scale. So I believe these are the areas which one has to look at while delivering solutions to the rural market.
Right. Thank you, Rajat. And Benjamin, you have already spoken a little bit about the investors' perspective on rural-based startups. But if you could quickly just tell us about the three key areas that you think, as an investor, rural-focused startup should focus on in terms of investment.
I think I'll again very much speak from the market and the consumer side of it. First is, I mean, if you have an idea, definitely test it out very well. Okay, so does it work? And it is working for rural, then that makes sense. So what we call the customer discovery, you need to have your customer, you need to identify your market, you need to be very sure of what you're kind of delivering. So that's the biggest important point as a investing point of view. You look at, so do you have that scenario? Then you go ahead. Second, I think the rest of the gentlemen has already said it. Now you really need to look at market. You need to look at viability. You need to be consistently there. I think that's, you have a long-term game. There is no short-term game in rural. It's a we used to call it in the older times. Don't flirt, marry. That's the key important element that we used to talk about it. So that's what rural is all about. And wait for the patients to have the results coming in. And they are aspirational. You need to deliver. You need to have the serviceability, and you need to reach out. That's the, I think, the summary of all those things.
Right. Thank you, all of you, for giving such wonderful, insightful tips for all of us here. Now, we already have a question from the audience. How are rural startups contributing to making rural India Atmanirbhar? Let's begin with you, Benjamin.
I think I may have a couple of examples, and we can start with many of these things. I mean, starting with agriculture. Agriculture is one single area where startups are contributing significantly, right from the soil testing scenario. A soil testing takes about 3 to 5 days to come the result. Can you do it in 3 hours? There's a technology that can be deployed. So that startup has a direction to make. You look at gherkins, which is 100% exported. It has a fruit fly infection. Can you sort it out much before it's sent out? I mean, you start looking at these scenarios one by one. You have so many startups that have come and really put in their ideas and efforts and made that change happen. And that's literally Atmanirbhar Bharat. We are talking about ourselves. We have the ability, we have the direction to do it, and I can keep on talking about these stories. There's a person who can sort cashew nuts based on color, and he can do it much faster. So that changes the whole game plan. There is a integrated farming approach which takes on the feed from one and converts it into something else. There is a guy who can convert any biomass into activated carbon. I mean, what are we talking? I mean, seriously, we are at the cusp of change. I can't be more passionate about this. This is what practically how startups is going to take place or work out. Am I making sense? I mean, I'm really talking about
Yes,
a
absolutely.
different
I think
direction.
we are just beginning. It's like endless from here on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
on a lighter side, I feel that Mr. Benjamin has actually named all the startups there for he's mentoring, because I think the kind of the range at which he is actually explained. I think that explains the rural scenario, and I mean they're really making it happen. But thanks for that, Benjamin. Yeah,
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, Vamsi. I mean, as you go deeper, you see that direction coming in.
yeah.
Right, absolutely. Vamsi, on that note, what's your opinion on this? How are rural startups contributing to making rural India Atmanirbhar?
I think I'm a believer of it. In fact, see, real Atmanirbhar is, I mean, personally, if you ask me, for me, the definition of Atmanirbhar is if you're actually able to earn decent income sitting in your own place. Ideally, if you were given, I mean, if I were given a chance 20 years back, I would have stayed in my town. I would have not even come to the city where I'm living now. So that's where, real Atmanirbhar is. I think that's where we are also, continuously working towards it. I think the way the startups, the way the rural startups, especially both on again on the demand side and the supply side, they're actually making Bharat the real Atmanirbhar, and there are thousands of examples. Like I can also tell many influencers, many consumers who have actually benefited. Like if I said 600 people who have migrated back, and if at least 300 of them are still staying in rural and earning a decent income as compared to urban, that's what is Atmanirbhar.
Right, absolutely. I think the pandemic also helped us realize this, that you can be an influencer and business person from wherever you are in the world. You don't need to be physically present anywhere to actually uh, make your idea into a business model. Isn't that right?
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
definitely
Rajat,
right.
What are your thoughts on this?
Mansi, how do I see that? I will give example of AgroNxt. We have got more than 65% of our team, which is from tier 3 towns, right? So people out there in tier 3 towns, they are the hope for the country. If they want to contribute towards the nation building, so this gives
Hmm.
organizations like us, startups like us, a huge hope that India is going to be Atmanirbhar. You see that there is a huge scope that micro entrepreneurship by models like us, which is being offered, and models like Hesa, is creating a huge opportunity for micro entrepreneurs across the length and breadth of the nation. Schemes like
Right.
PLI, wherein drones are a drone industry is literally being brought, and government of India is creating a drone festival to ensure that there is a huge production, and there would be a huge demand right in the country, and then we are looking at the prospects of export. So from IoTs to export of fresh fruits and vegetables. So we see that rural Atmanirbhar is about to come, and this is just the beginning of great time for our country.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, we have yet another question. Now, we have witnessed a lot of unicorns come emerging out of urban Indian startup sector. What are your thoughts on rural unicorns? Which sectors have that potential?
If I have to pick it up,
Yeah.
already there are very good players, especially in the agri domain, who are actually moving towards that direction. Likes of Dehat, Resha Mandi, AgroStar. There are many players who are
Yeah.
actually, almost actually, reaching out there. And then, I mean, primarily it comes from the agri and the allied services, because that's where the scale is really there. And I also feel that there is a large scope for the commerce players in rural to come, and then the last mile logistics and is one thing which probably it is not cracked fully at this moment. I mean, I'm actually waiting for some large disruption to actually happen at that end. Other than all this, I mean, maybe a matter of couple of years, but yeah, Hesa should be there in that kind of list there.
Right. Benjamin?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with Vamsi, and I'm definitely saying that I think in the services and allied sector scenario, there's a potential to kind of really look at a unicorn. But from a solution perspective, rural is fairly scattered, and the type of solutions that we'll continue to create startup with about 250, 300, 500 crore, maybe 1,000 crore, maybe a 2,000 crore. That are going to be more product driven and all those things that is going to come in. So there are two aspects to entire thing. The services and the allied sector will really create some of the unicorns. Some of the names Vamsi has already mentioned, and others will be literally there creating that employment and the livelihood that we are really looking at.
Right. Thank you. Rajat?
Honestly, my bet is on two areas. One is deep tech driven solutions, which has got AI/ML inbuilt. I firmly believe that products along with the services at a very high scale, which are going to be affordable at the scale of farmers. Say any service which is in the range of USD 1 to 2 can be something which can be availed by the customers, especially in the rural India. And any platform which is offering their subscription based services with deep tech as well as AIML is my bet, number one. Number two, I believe that with pandemic, we see that people have become health conscious. I believe that from the production side of the agriculture inputs, biotech startups, they will have a huge scope in the time to come, because not just India, but from the global perspective, the demand would be actually very high.
Right,
Yeah, I
absolutely.
agree with
Now,
Rajat. Yeah, I agree with Rajat on the first point. Because that's where there is a huge
Yeah,
scope. Because unlike urban, where you start owning consumer, if you can actually start owning the right solution that we can offer to the rural, and which can
yeah.
be done at a masses, I think Rajat. I think thanks for that. I think that can be a very good segment for rural to be looked at.
Yeah.
absolutely. Now, Vamsi, you mentioned last mile logistics. Now, here's a question from one of our viewers. Is last mile logistics both of providing all inputs, agricultural requirement of rural folks, including farmers, a viable option? Also, reverse logistics of rural produce going to urban areas or consumption zone. Your thoughts on this?
Uh, I mean, thanks whoever has asked this question, because if I would have known the answer completely, I would have cracked it myself. But okay, let me kind of tell whatever I know it. See, the thing is, the way the fragmentation of the demand coming from rural versus an urban scenario. It's very tough to actually create a holistic solution, because you have 1,000 population, but still you need to deliver the product at the right time. And the way the last mile logistics, at least at this moment. But yes, thanks to many startups, at least I know 4 or 5 startups, like H&S, like Carry Now. There are many people who are trying to solve it again in few geographies or in bits and pieces. Again, non-perishable at this moment. But especially when it comes to the agri, taking in inputs to the rural market still by a strong supply chain model can be a viable option. But a reverse logistics, where you need to really focus on the freshness of the produce, or the way you need to enable the last mile. I think there has to be a lot of work, and probably this is where I feel that a collaborative approach should come in, where some demand generator plus a logistics plus somebody who is into a cold chain or a warehousing plus some IoT solution provider has to come together, because it's not a one person's game. I feel it. But yeah, I think there has been a lot of work that has been happening, and a lot of startups are trying to solve it. But still, I feel that it's a large problem to solve.
Absolutely. Rajat, could you weigh in on this?
What do I see, Mansi, that look at the broader perspective? So Indian agriculture is a USD 370 billion opportunity, right? And as rural infrastructure is improving, connectivity, air connectivity as well as road connectivity is improving. There are big players who are investing in creating rural warehousing infrastructure. There is a lot of investment around controlled atmospheric storage as well as typical storage solutions. So I just believe that in the coming time, a lot of players has to come together to offer the solution, and with that solution in place, you see that the connection between the rural consumers and the urban consumers would be made. Otherwise, if the connection is missing, so it can really make a unit level economic loss for many players. So a lot of opportunity is to be seen by entrepreneurs coming together. So possibly AgroNxt offering the solution to Hesa, and somewhere we are further collaborating with somebody, and that is how sustainability will come to many startups as they actually reach the scale.
Right, absolutely. Benjamin, your thoughts?
I think most of the things have already been told by Vamsi and Rajat. Just couple of things like we have a very complex ecosystem. Regionalization, localization. I mean, what is produced in one place doesn't get to another. The distances. I mean, it's a very complex. Over and above it is the MSP versus the market price. So everything has to be kind of taken into account. What definitely is right. Some of the models have been cracked going into the last mile of rural, but from rural to urban, it's still kind of a difficult proposition that needs a lot more realistic minds and thoughts to kind of make it happen. And
Right.
the implicit difficulties are already there. I mean, the existing system, its losses, its difficulties are all there. So you'll have to work within that system to kind of crack it and then work it out. So hopefully, some of the work is already happening. Let's see how these things evolve. I'll keep my fingers crossed at that point.
Right. Now, Rajat briefly spoke about micro entrepreneurs. So here's my question to all of you. How can startups help and create micro entrepreneurs from rural India?
Well, should I try and make a
Please go
go at it? Oh, that's a very pertinent and a difficult question to answer, and it will have many layers to it. Right from if you go back say 20 years, micro entrepreneurship should have been also created by Project Shakti of Unilever. 1,60,000 women got into some kind of an entrepreneurship by reaching out. The second set of the entrepreneurs is basically whatever is the skill sets that locally have. Do you find a market somewhere in the urban or a outside India or somewhere that so zari to leather to Kolhapuri chappals. So that's another set of the set. But these are still a very small window to the entire game of entrepreneurship. You have almost close to about in terms of less than 35 years of youth who needs employment, who needs direction. I think the more fragmented startups come in and how they can take on with that some kind of a skill, the employability that is required in that segment, if you can really drive it, then there is a possibility to kind of tide over. It will still not get tide over fully, but we should be able to kind of touch. For example, say like in the construction industry, the tile manufacturing has completely changed. So you have a vertical cut, 90-degree tiles. So it is need to be laid by a very specialist person. Not a common mason would not be able to lay it because it will show up. So therefore, it needs a certain amount of scaling, and 500,000 people are required in that segment if it moves forward. How do you make it and then bring it up? So these are all permutation combination. I hope I'm kind of making sense. It's a big segment. It has different aspects to it. I mean, others can contribute to the entire idea.
Sure. Rajat?
Yeah, Mansi, my take is I would like to cite our own example. So we are offering a deep tech and AI/ML driven soil testing solution, which takes just less than 2 minutes of the time to deliver soil testing results. So how do we work upon it? That in next 12 to 15 months of the time, we aim to create at least 5,000 micro entrepreneurs across the length and breadth of the nation. So we see that we are one of the contributors, right? And I see that many startups have to really skill up the rural youth, and we have to have a collaborative approach because across the year the soil test will not happen. And let us say micro entrepreneurs, I just spoke about the drone. So for whole year the drone spraying will not happen, right? But in every month of the year there could be some or another opportunity which can be taken by the micro entrepreneurs present in the rural area. So we have to have a collaborative approach as far as we all startups are concerned. And we see that some startups may work on the fintech-driven solution, which can be looked at by these entrepreneurs. A deep tech-driven startup like us can offer our soil testing solution and the SaaS platform. And similarly, we can have some solution coming by Hesa to these micro entrepreneurs. So it's a perfect amalgamation of a collaborative approach wherein micro entrepreneurs can be created in lakhs of the numbers. They may remain in their own homes, in their own villages, and they can support the rural economies by being there.
Right, absolutely. Rajat, I think very well put. Vamsi, your thoughts?
I mean, if I have to put it, it becomes like a pitching session for Hesa. Otherwise, our entire model is built on this micro entrepreneurship creation only. So, because our entire model drives on an influencer or an entrepreneur who is sitting in a village, but leaving our example. See, like for example, Telangana government has an initiative called Intinta Innovator. Intinta means Gar Gar Pe. So there are a lot of these rural initiatives, rural innovators who are actually, starting a lot of these initiatives. Maybe I would say, a machine which can actually take the dust out of the, let's say, a dal, or which takes the processing of, groundnut cold pressed oil better. So these are all very small solutions, but, very, very innovative solutions done by, people at a very, last mile. And there are many such micro entrepreneurs who are, who have ability to create their own solutions. And these programs from, government, and I'm sure there are a lot of such programs across country which have been supported by a lot of these initiatives. So I think, other than the general micro entrepreneurs being created by the likes of, the HULs, or, or the HESA kind of a model where somebody is earning, there is a good amount of innovation that is happening in rural. And then, if we can actually create these kind of micro entrepreneurs, and then they can actually, contribute to themselves and also to the, economy in some way. So that's my, answer to it.
Right. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts here. And I think certainly it's been a decade of change for startups in rural India. And on this note, I would like to thank all of you for joining in today, taking out your valuable time, sharing your insights, learnings with all of us here. And thank you to all the viewers for joining in and participating in this conversation. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining in today, and stay safe, everyone.